This is Floss Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Shawn Powers and Jonathan Bennett join me in a round table talking about all kinds of things, the Fediverse, Twitter, ChatGPT, and the fun title for the show is May or May Not Be Notable, which is what it says now. If you're verified on Twitter, you've kind of been demoted to your May or May Not Be Notable, and that's just kind of a theme through the whole thing. But it's a lot of fun, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Floss Weekly, episode 711, recorded Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. May or may not be notable. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Code Comments, an original podcast from Red Hat that lets you listen in on two experienced technologists as they describe their building process and what they've learned from their experiences. Search for Code Comments in your podcast player. And by Bitwarden. Get the password manager that offers a robust and cost-effective solution that can drastically increase your chances of staying safe online. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. And by Collide, that's Collide with a K. Collide is an endpoint security solution that gives IT teams a single dashboard for all devices, regardless of their operating system. Visit collide.com/floss to learn more and activate a free 14-day trial today. No credit card required. Hello again, everybody, everywhere. I am Doc Searls. This is Floss Weekly. And this week, our guests are each other, in this case, Shawn Powers and Jonathan Bennett. All of us here, I realize, in flattish states in the American Midwest, in flyover country. Here we are. What I used to do. So since Jonathan's drinking, what are you doing, Shawn? I
like way to build us up. Like today, our guests are from the most boring places, and
not really. It's
not doing much. Prepping for snow. That's about it. And
yeah.
Being green, it's not easy to be green.
Start throwing salt out on the driveway, or do you do that? Do you do prophylactic salt, like preventative salt, to stop it from happening?
No, I mean it doesn't stop it from happening. It's really the ice that is more dangerous. Though, if it snows, it's fine. It packs. You can, you get up and down the stairs. It's when it flirts at right around the freezing point, and so, oh look, it rained. Shoop, boom. Nope, that was ice. So that's where the salt comes in handy.
And you don't get that much snow in Oklahoma, do you? I think that's a job for the Dakotas and Kansas and Nebraska.
Yeah, snow is pretty rare. We do get the ice storm down here too, though. And really that's when it gets bad. You get a half inch of ice on everything and tree limbs break and power goes out. And southern Oklahoma, North Texas, it gets really bad. Every once in a while, every couple of years, we get a really bad one.
So we got our own stories this morning. So why don't we start with yours, Jonathan? You have I'm just because on my cheat sheet, you're first.
Okay. So
talk about what's happening.
I'm going to talk
as the year comes down.
We're a little behind the curve. Yeah, we're a little behind the curve on this. I want to talk about Twitter, and we try really hard to not get political here on Floss Weekly. One of the reasons being that we all come from different political backgrounds, and we don't want to have a political fight on camera. And I was talking yesterday in the Slack, and I think there is an open source apolitical tack that we can take on this that might be really interesting to talk about. And that is, of course, Elon Musk paid $44 billion for Twitter. And some people are very concerned about that. Just the idea of someone with a different ideology than theirs and different value system from theirs suddenly controlling the platform on which they do a lot of communication. And of course, a lot of people have moved to Mastodon and other platforms as a result. And the thought that comes to mind that I want to run past you guys is whether or not you like Elon Musk or you think he's evil incarnate, it's a good thing that people are now thinking about, should I be trusting this big centralized platform that one person or a group of people have control over? Or should I go to something that is open source like Mastodon because it actually gives people control over their own conversations? And I think that's putting aside all of the political junk and all of the, the really toxicity that's out there from all over the place. I think that's a good thing. And yay, maybe this is finally the thing we needed to get our foot in the door with Mastodon and other platforms.
Well, to me, it's and logic. I'm on Mastodon. I'm in two different Mastodon instances, one for the TWiT one and another one called journa.host, which is nothing but journalists. You have to kind of apply to get in there. And I haven't left Twitter either, and frankly, I'm also on Facebook and I'm on my own blogs and I'm all over the place. I use 8 browsers. I think and logic applies here. An interesting thing to me about Twitter is that, and people don't talk about this that much. It's like, it's all about who you follow and who follows you. And, I have like 25,000 followers, which I'll say again is meaningless. It's kind of like a parking space. There's 21,000 cars going by and it engages 10 a day. But I follow thousands of people, but none of them are political. I go out of my way to not follow anything political or remark at anything political. And or that's disagreeable or contentious in some other way. So algorithmically, it doesn't look like a trash heap to me. It looks about the same as it ever did. I'm seeing none of the problems with it, but I love the fact that Mastodon is there and that Mastodon is growing and all of that. To me, it's just the beginning of whatever it will become. And it's part of the pendulum swing from centralized to decentralized. I think we kind of go back and forth with this. But I also think it's just a really interesting thing. And I don't have a problem with Twitter, frankly.
Yeah, I was going to say the pendulum thing, and we're on so many podcasts. I don't remember where we talked about it with Kyle Rankin, though, talking about, there was a time not too long ago where things like Jabber, the Jabber protocol was starting to be this decentralized way that we talk instead of using, AOL's chat. And it seems like we kind of started to congregate on a single monolithic, company-owned platforms again. And maybe this is going to, nudge things the other way. Like, Jonathan's point, where it's good if we have some sort of decentralized control, like individual control over things. And I mean, as far as Twitter itself, I mean, I think that it's been talked about ad nauseum, political or not political, but it is weird. Like yesterday, I'm verified on Twitter, and now if you click on it, it now says this is a legacy verified account. This person may or may not be notable. I know, that's kind of a funny dig.
You vote, have a vote. Put it up for a vote. Narrator. The narrator says it was not notable. He's not. Yeah. So, but yeah, I do. I think it's great, and I think that even being conscious of how centralized control can be detrimental for whatever reason, for political reasons, just for whatever reason. I mean, Elon could say, you know what? This sucks. I don't want to do it anymore. Everybody's fired. Twitter.com now redirects to SpaceX and there is no more Twitter. He owns it. I mean, that would be detrimental to lots of people's, big forms of communication. A lot of my livelihood is based on social interactions on the internet, and having all of my 3 eggs, again, I'm not a big person online, in somebody else's basket's a little unsettling. So yeah, I think it's a good thing that we have that. Here's a way to look at it. Everything is
there you go. Yeah, may or may not be verified.
Does it say may or may not be verified? I can't read it.
No. It says I'm a legacy verified account. It may or may not be notable.
Wow. That is great.
Yeah.
Oh man, what a demotion!
Yeah,
I know.
I kind of used to maybe matter. Wow.
And now there's yellow check marks. I saw somebody with a yellow check mark. I don't even know what that means. And there's also the verification badge and then an official badge underneath the verified check mark. It's crazy.
Well, they're experimenting.
They're still trying to figure Twitter's still trying to figure out how it's going to work all of those under the new everybody pays $8 which that's fascinating in and of itself. So there's this saying when it comes to things online, if it's free and there's advertisements, then you're no longer the consumer, you're the product. And is it maybe a good thing that Twitter is exploring this idea of making the consumers again? I don't know, that there are some
making customers
healthy potential out of that.
I actually would not have a problem with that. I would not. I don't know if I'd pay $8 a month. That's what he wants. $8 a month is a lot.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea that and we have Club Twit here. There's a freemium to that kind of thing. It's a little bit cheaper. It's 1/7 or 1/8 cheaper. But value for value. There's nothing wrong with having a marketplace there. It is weird in the sense that it's a big change. And I was about to say is that in Hollywood every movie is a project. They call it a project, and it kind of, a lot of people come together, a lot of money gets spent, it gets made, and then it goes away, or it sits around as some kind of legacy. But I think almost everything that happens on the internet is a project of some sort. Some last longer, some don't. Twitter was a project of Odeo, and it was a side thing that they did that kind of took off. It got big and it got infrastructural, but there's nothing that says it has to be what it's been. And that's, to me, that's a grace of business on the net, not necessarily a problem or, a failing of some sort.
So it's the Roman Empire of communication. Well,
it's more like, this is kind of an interesting thing. There are a lot of places on the web that are, the history of Europe or the history of the world, year by year from 2000 BC or something like that. And you just look at a map of the world, and Europe is especially interesting because there are all these little city states that come up and go down, and parts of countries that come up and go down. It's all a project. It's all a project. Each of us is a project. It's okay if it doesn't work out.
That's kind of an interesting pivot point to talk a little bit more about Mastodon, because I've seen people create Mastodon accounts and go over to Mastodon, their various servers, and then walk away and go, oh my goodness, this is not ready for prime time. What is y'all's thoughts on that? What have you found?
It isn't, but what's prime time there? Was Linux ready for prime time? Well, it became that. Linux is probably not a very good comparison, but the sort of bubble. If you did a visual of all of Mastodon and all the instances, there'll be some bigger ones and some smaller ones, and it's kind of like it reproduces by budding, but nothing breaks off. It's just like when a bunch of bubbles is very effervescent. I think it's very hard to port one's habits over from Twitter over to Mastodon. But it's cool. I think there's a lot of experimentation happening there, and the fact that it's open means it can, and that's fun and cool. I shrink my screen. I shrink my window so I'm looking at the camera. Now I have to expand it to see whatever it was that Ant threw up there that I can't read. It's already scrolled by.
Shawn, there are a couple of there's things tied in to Mastodon. It's not an island unto itself, and you had some notes here about some of those. What PeerTube and Castopod? What are those?
You're on mute, dude.
I think Shawn's muted. The Scourge.
Sorry.
Or maybe
there were dogs barking.
I thought for a second there that maybe
those are.
I thought for a second
dogs.
your Linux desktop was not ready for prime time.
No. Just my professionalism is not ready for prime time. The piece that makes Mastodon work across instances with decentralization is ActivityPub, and I am not a developer. However, using ActivityPub, there's a whole bunch of other things that are then compatible. Things like PeerTube, which is like I'll be honest, PeerTube is a little even more complicated than that. They communicate with ActivityPub, but then there's like some web torrents going on. It's supposedly to, if not replace, augment in some way the idea that YouTube has, where it's, like videos, but then it's distributed among peers. I don't know. I haven't looked into it too much, but it uses ActivityPub. And then castapod.org is it's a device it's a program to host podcast episodes, but in a way that they're ActivityPub compatible. The big question that I have is, this is all great that there's like different technologies that are starting to use ActivityPub. Years ago, I had the notion that why do we have all these different things? Why can't there just be like some big the feed, and whatever your particular thing that you want to contribute to the feed is, people can subscribe to, and maybe that's ActivityPub, but it also seems like it's RSS or Atom, or it feels a little bit like some of ActivityPub is reinventing the wheel. I realize that there's more to it than that. The decentralization where like things are cached on instance to instance and stuff. But my concern is that we're going to go so far into the ActivityPub is awesome thing that we'll start doing things with ActivityPub that maybe don't even require ActivityPub, because it's far more complicated to administer. Spoken from a guy who manages his own Mastodon instance than something like static like RSS or Atom.
Yeah, so just tell me quick, because I'm gonna appear stupid here, but I don't mind doing that. What is ActivityPub?
Yeah, it's the way that instances like Mastodon instances pull updates from each other. It's like RSS, but mutated into something a little more decentralized, so that other people can distribute stuff for you. It's what puts the federation in the federation.
Yeah, it's basically a protocol for sending data back and forth. But you can do more than just Mastodon on it. There's a whole bunch of different services that can sit on top of it. So you mentioned PeerTube, which is sort of kind of a YouTube replacement. There's I forget the name of it, but there's like an Instagram replacement. There's a replacement for sharing photos.
Pixel something.
There's multiple different services that you can do on top of ActivityPub, which is, geeks like us. That's one of the things we find so exciting about it, is that there's so much flexibility, and you can make all of these services talk to each other and just work together. Once you get all the stuff set up right.
I wanted Simon last week or the week before, I guess it was the week before, wanted to make a distinction between Mastodon and the Fediverse. Everybody's talking about Mastodon. He says, but don't forget the whole Fediverse. Was he talking, do you know, about something completely different, or just Mastodon within the context of the Fediverse as everything that can possibly be federated in that kind of way?
Probably talking about, at least conceptually, something like ActivityPub, a way that the different things can communicate behind the scenes. It's like, Mastodon uses ActivityPub. ActivityPub doesn't use Mastodon, if that makes sense. It's just the underlying communication protocol.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I want to get to where this bleeds over into blogging, because I think there's a risk that blogging will make a comeback, especially given what's going on with Twitter. But first, I have to say that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Code Comments. That's an original podcast from Red Hat. When you're working on a project and you leave behind a small reminder in the code, a code comment to help others learn from your work. Well, this podcast takes that idea by letting you listen in on two experienced technologists as they describe their building process. There's a lot of work required to bring a project from whiteboard to development, and none of us can do it alone. The host, Burr Sutter, is a Red Hatter and a lifelong developer advocate and a community organizer. In each episode, Burr sits down with experienced technologists from across the industry to trade stories and talk about what they've learned from their experiences. In one on deep learning, he talks to a technologist from Intel about how Intel uses deep learning inside the company, has become quite dependent on it. It's an interesting episode. I recommend it. Episodes of all kinds are available anywhere you listen to podcasts and at redhat.com/Code Comments Podcast. Search for Code Comments in your podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. My thanks to Code Comments for their support. So, before there was Twitter and before there was the Fediverse and before there was all this other stuff, there was blogging and there was writing on the web. There was plenty of writing on the web. I started writing on the web in the early 90s, I guess, or writing online, but then on the web really after 95. And it got called blogging really starting around 1999. And I had a very successful blog. I mean, thousands, maybe like as many as 50,000 readers a day. And then Facebook came along and Twitter came along and they all left and all the writers went over there. But there's I sense, especially thanks to the early work Dave Weiner's doing now, and kind of a revival of RSS as a thing, and recognizing that RSS never went away. It's still the way lots and lots of stuff gets syndicated on the web. But the interesting thing to me is that the way I wrote in a blog was very tweet-like for a long time, but I could go long if I wanted to, and I could have headlines if I wanted to. Didn't have to have headlines if I didn't want to. But Twitter kind of shaped the way we work another way, and WordPress basically wants a headline, wants you to write a column every time. And that's happening now with Substack and with newsletters in general. Substack is yet another centralized platform, by the way. And it's acting like one, and I'm sure it's a good thing in many ways, but it's closed and has its own way of doing things. But what do you guys think of it? You write on Hackaday and other places, Jonathan. Do you see that as blogging? Do you think of that as blogging, or what's your thinking about where blogging goes?
It's pretty similar. I mean, you can do a lot with blogging. Like a lot of different things could fall under the category of blogging. There's been a thing that people have observed about Twitter, even before it changed hands. And it's something I've noticed too, and I think it ties in here. Twitter tends to make people snarky. And it tends to make us snipe at each other. And I think it's just because of the format and the limitation on how long your tweets can be. So back a few months ago, I did something I very rarely do, and I waded into a political discussion on Twitter. And it happened to be with Simon, one of our co-hosts. And after a couple of exchanges, I immediately said, all right, look, this is why I don't like discussing political things on Twitter. And Simon came back with, no, we need to discuss these things. I'm like, you're right. We need to discuss these things. But I hate doing it on Twitter because I am brought to the point of just making snide remarks at people rather than having a meaningful conversation about it. And one of the things I like about Hackaday and blogging in general, there's kind of this idea of long form expression as opposed to little tiny messages, is that you can get into the complexities and the nuances of things. And so when you take a hot button political issue, suddenly you find out, if you dive into those nuances, that it's more complicated than you thought it is. And the polarized viewpoints, the false dichotomy, there's more to it than that. And I think maybe blogging needs to come back. I'm not sure Twitter is a good thing for us as a species. What it has become, or what it did become. But yeah, blogging is super interesting because you can, if the topic requires it, you can get into nuances. And then, hopefully you have a good comment section and people can come back and correct you or have their own comments to make, their own viewpoints to share. It's interesting. It needs to come back, I think.
I think that you just nailed it there. I think that Twitter is the comment section without anything to any basis for conversation, right? Every Twitter or every comment thread that has devolved into anarchy at least has some basis for like a starting point, but Twitter is just the horrible comment section. So yeah, I think that's an unintentional great analogy that you made there, Jonathan.
I love that, Shawn. Twitter is the internet's horrible comment section without any of the content.
It's funny because I'm a snark. Snarky is probably the right way to put it. But I love one-liners and I love zingers and I love puns and I like. But mostly the way I've always done it is to more or less say amen to something that I liked rather than that's wrong and you're wrong and all that stuff. I think making people wrong is like an easy sport that doesn't really do much good. And but I'm an outlier in that sense. To me, in the long run, I think maybe this is an interesting way to look at it. I mean, we had blogging. Before that, we had just plain writing. You just write a page. You're an author of a page, which you built as if with blocks. And then blogging came along. There were several platforms for doing that. But basically WordPress won, but it knocked off something called movable type. And it basically embodied what movable type did, which was essays. You wrote essays. It was kind of optimized for essays, and then it turned into this big content management way of doing things that became kind of a standard. But the future's got a long time coming, and I think that the modalities are really what matter. You know, there's the Twitter modality, there's the Mastodon one, which I think we're just starting to work out. There are some length limits. What is it, 500 characters or something like that, or 500 words? There seems to be some kind of a limit there.
It depends. Again, that's not dictated by ActivityPub. That's dictated by Mastodon, I think. And even then, I think you definitely can change the software. I don't know if there's options to change it without changing code, but I think Mastodon's default is 500 characters.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, different coffee shops. This one's got 6 chairs and that one's enormous. I mean, I just went into a coffee shop here off of the side of Indiana University, which I hadn't paid attention to before. And it's like, oh my God, there must be 100 people in here. And it's still very cozy somehow. And it has a feel to it. Oh, this one you order at the counter, that one you don't, they come out. There's just lots of opportunities here. And the whole idea of needing platforms, I think, may go out. That may even be the big thing, that you have code that you can use to build lots of different stuff. And some things will perform as platforms in the sense that they host, and other things will give you ways to DIY whatever you're doing. I think that's something that needs to come back. That's sort of off the table right now, but really, really, really does. I mean, I really miss having servers under my desk, even though I wasn't expert at running them. The fact that they were there made a difference.
Yeah, and
I want
the
that.
whole idea of decentralized stuff. And here's the thing: my observations on Mastodon is that Mastodon is a little more boring. Oh, what a hot take, Shawn! I thought you were open source guy. No, but in the best possible way, right? Because
tweet that somebody.
Twitter has an algorithm that is designed to get engagement at all costs, even if that cost is the downfall of humanity, right? So, I mean, Twitter, the algorithm will, show more people the juicy stuff. And since Mastodon and, ActivityPub in general, whatever, client you're using to communicate in that way, since it doesn't have that, that ingrained need to boost engagement at all costs, you just get a better sense of the people that you follow, and to the point where there's I'd call him out because it's a great guy. I don't remember who it was, but he tends to boost things, which is the Mastodon term for retweeting, boost things that I find very interesting. And he's almost become my meat version of an algorithm of showing me interesting things. And so, I use it to follow stuff, but I have noticed that it's not as, it doesn't feel like I'm an addict when I'm on Mastodon, whereas on Twitter, it's sometimes like, oh, what's happening? Oh, what's going on? What's going on? And it just keeps feeding me more and more. And I think it's ultimately a very good thing if we don't have that feeling towards our social media. Rather, it's just an exchange of ideas and such. So
something I've wanted for a long time, and I've talked about this here before, I would love to see open source curation algorithms.
Yeah.
And the ability to control which algorithm you're seeing on your timeline. I think that would be a game changer.
Oh, that would
You're
be
right.
interesting.
Yeah, so Twitter and Facebook does it too.
Yeah.
Facebook does it a little differently, but has the same problem. They have an algorithm that shows you things that's going to make you interact with it. That's the whole idea, because then their ads make more money, right? That's generally how this has come to work. Yeah. So what if you had a service, and maybe Mastodon could be this? I don't think they have the hooks for this yet, but maybe Mastodon could eventually be this. You had a service where, you had all of these. So the way with Mastodon it works is once someone from your server follows someone on a different server, your server also follows that server. And so when you go to the thing called the federated feed, it's just every toot, the equivalent of, which there's a hilarious story about that maybe we should talk about. But every toot that has happened on all of those followed servers, you get in your federated feed. Well, the problem with that is it's the fire hose. I mean, there's just so many of them there. And then, your list of people that you follow, if you're me particularly, is pretty small because you've not been on Mastodon very long.
Exactly.
And it would be lovely if there was a middle ground where you said, hey, here's my algorithm. Maybe it's complex, but it's open source and I kind of understand what it's going to do. I want to see the federated feed, but run through this algorithm so that I only get the things that, this algorithm think I'm going to be interested in. And maybe you could have an algorithm that is not just the things that are going to make you interact, which, in a lot of cases, I think is just that list of things that will make you angry, which is not great. Yeah. But to be able to tailor that to something hopefully healthier, man, I think that would make a huge difference to the way we interact with the internet.
And there's a pretty simple way to hook something like that in, because right now Mastodon tries to do that with the idea of following hashtags, right? You can follow individual users and you can also follow hashtags. If there was some sort of AI/algorithmic way to have a smart hashtag, if you will, it seems like that would be able to fit into the infrastructure without too much pain and have some third party like curated smart hashtag sort of thing to try to make it the type of feed that you want. Because yes, the federated timeline, once there's a lot of servers that your server or your instance is talking to, it's crazy to see. And some instances don't share their federated timeline at all. So, again, with great power comes great responsibility. So, not all instances do the same thing. There's configuration things. But yeah, I think that would be a wonderful way. It'd be nice to see some positive excitement in my Mastodon feed. And like I said, there are a couple people who have taken it upon themselves to almost become, meat algorithms. And I appreciate them. So
I'm very humored by that. It's a time is a flat circle sort of thing, because very early in the internet there were curated lists of links, and some of the things we take for granted now started as just somebody's really boring web page with a whole bunch of links on it.
Yeah. And okay, this is full circle to this is everything that I have to offer to the show. But, I talked about the RSS versus Atom versus now ActivityPub. And I think that we're going super far into the everything needs to have ActivityPub connectivity to be cool. Like there's, WordPress is and Tumblr is and all of these things are going to do it. Whereas I think that possibly just using some other client to share links to those sites is just as fine. I don't necessarily think they have to be native ActivityPub conscious platforms in order to benefit from the Fediverse. So do with that what you will. And
sure.
I think the world is a Fediverse, basically. I'm thinking about the physical world, We have all these overlapping
these are the voyagers of the starship.
And yeah.
Get my theremin.
Starship Fediverse. Yeah. There's look at
I told you that was all I had to offer to the show. Everything here is fluff.
Everything here is that's another. Well, this is actually probably a good point for me to say that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, at work, on the go and is trusted by millions. With Bitwarden, you can securely store credentials across personal and business worlds. Bitwarden recently rolled out a bunch of stuff. For example, passwordless login for the Web Vault. Now you can authenticate into the Bitwarden Web Vault using your Bitwarden mobile app instead of entering your master password. You have Organization Vault and login flow updates. Some organization functions have moved to improve the Web Vault UI and to accommodate new login options. The login process has been separated into two screens. Skim updates. Skim triggered events will now log from Skim instead of unknown, and the Skim API key will now be obfuscated by default. There's generate username and password from iOS app extension. On-the-fly generation of usernames and passwords can now be done from the iOS app extension accessible from the share menu while using apps such as browsers. New theme for mobile. The popular solarized dark theme has been brought to mobile. There's directory connector. Query parameters can be used in group filters for Google Workspace. Performance optimization. Bitwarden has improved Web Vault load times and experience for accounts with access to thousands of vault items. Bitwarden is also a must-need for your business. It's fully customizable and adapts to your business needs. Their team's organization option is $3 a month per user, and their enterprise organization plan is $5 a month per user. Share private data securely with coworkers across departments or the entire company. Individuals can use their basic free account forever for an unlimited number of passwords, or upgrade anytime to their premium account for less than $1 a month. The family organization option gives up to 6 users premium features for only $3.33 a month. At TWiT, we're fans of password managers. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, on the go, or at work, and is trusted by millions of individuals, teams, and organizations worldwide. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. That's bitwarden.com/twit.
For what it's worth. Yeah, for what it's worth, whenever anybody asks me about password managers, Bitwarden is always the one that I recommend, not because they're a sponsor or anything, but just because when I was doing research for an article I wrote on different password managers, they were the one that seemed the least creepy and offered the best options for the, for the needs, including all the things that right now I'm currently using LastPass, and I'm using it only because I've been using it forever. But yeah, whenever anybody asks, Bitwarden seems like the one to go to, especially if you don't have one already.
Now, for those of you on Club Twitter or something who haven't seen the ad, heard the ad, we still have a testimonial there. I like it.
Yeah. So was that, yeah. How's that for some out of context, weird sponsorship stuff?
The ad was long enough, which it should be, that I forget where we were exactly.
Yeah, so let's do an awkward cut. So anyway, more about wet socks, right? What is up with that? I just like to really mess with Club Twit people thinking they missed awesome ads.
What was it about? A wet bird never flies at night. What was that?
So I wanted to cover something else, and there was an awesome segue from Shawn talking about creepiness, but it's gone now. So
so you want me to talk more about creepy things? All right.
There's the lost segue.
No, that may not be a good idea. I want to talk about cameras for a second. And it's
great. That's good.
It's tangential to the whole Mastodon and Twitter discussion. So the FCC just recently banned devices made by I'm not going to be able to pronounce these correctly, but Hikvision, Duha, and a couple of other Chinese companies. And I've made the observation that this is something that both political parties in the United States seem to support, which to me says that there's probably some classified documents that people have looked at and gone, oh, well, okay, we actually do need to ban those companies. That's my take on it. That could be wrong. I think in probably 10 or 20 years, we'll be able to do a freedom of information request and actually get the rest of the story. All that said, what people are suspecting is that some of these cameras in certain circumstances will actually send back information to the company that made them and then the government of China can say, hey, we need to be able to see this camera feed right now, which is really, really creepy if you're using one of these cameras in your house as a baby monitor, things like that. And so I want to give a quick little plug for setting up your own camera system with ZoneMinder, but also talk about this idea that open source, ZoneMinder is an open source camera system, gives you the ability to get away from all of this creepy stuff, whether it's Twitter or, the closed source firmware on your camera that you don't know what it does, or the closed source firmware on your camera aggregator, the thing that records all of your camera feeds. You don't know what that's doing with that data. And the thing that I also wanted to get in is ZoneMinder is actually kind of in the need for some financial support right now. The Isaac Connor, the guy that's heading it up, is really having to think seriously about finding a different job just because he's having trouble making ends meet on ZoneMinder. So I wanted to get that in, but also just, man, it's really cool that these projects exist outside of Mastodon, outside of the Fediverse, things like ZoneMinder and a bunch of other projects that let you get off the train. They let you get away from the potentially really creepy things that happen, whether it be because of government influence or because of the need for advertising revenue. And I understand that it's not in everybody's wheelhouse to set up their own ZoneMinder server, but I just love that the opportunity is there, that if you really want to, and you're really, just a little bit paranoid, kind of like I am, that you can make your own private network with no internet access, put all of your cameras on that, and then just have it talk to your ZoneMinder server and know that nobody else is spying on your cameras. That's one of the most powerful things about open source is you can actually get to the point where you can trust your software.
And you just stepped on my not rebuttal, but my addition there, because I have some Daua, whatever, I don't know how to say it either, but in the Hack Vision stuff, I have a few of those cameras because if anybody follows me online for any stretch of time, that I have like cameras set up on bird feeders and birdhouses over the years and multiple different recording mechanisms and posting automatically to YouTube, and Birdtopia has been several iterations now. But even if you use those cameras in a non their environment, all of them have cloud-based stuff, which I'm sure is what's where the creepiness takes place. You can use them locally and pull that video feed locally from your network using, RTSP or something like that. But you still have to be careful, because if they're on your network and they have access to the internet and they have a gateway and all of that stuff, they could still send stuff over the network and, to the internet. So you still have to be careful. When you said you could put it on a private network that's not connected to the internet and just send the stuff to ZoneMinder, boom, chef kiss. That's a perfect example of how to get around those things without worrying about, monitoring your network for outgoing packets and that sort of a thing. So yeah, just using ZoneMinder in and of itself doesn't offer you complete safety from creepiness, but it gives you the ability to stop creepiness, even if you're using some of those cameras that might have less than trustworthy firmware. So yeah, that was my addendum. That's it. Not a rebuttal, an addendum.
Nintendo.
A yes and.
Yeah.
Yes and. Yeah. It's clearly an improv show. So
yeah, an improv show. You can't step on anybody. So when you brought up cameras, Jonathan, I immediately thought of the cameras in every TV. It's a different thing. Of course, you can't use ZoneMinder to get on top of those. I mean, every television now that you buy has a camera for looking at you. They're all made in China.
I don't think that's true.
I think it is.
I think mine has a camera in it. A lot of them do. Yeah, a lot of them do.
And a lot of them do, and they're not necessarily visible. Okay, Shawn's shaking his head for those of you on the radio.
I mean, I'm looking at
into this.
The TV I just mounted on the wall. There's no camera in there that I know of, but now I'm all like, maybe I should have pants on. I don't know.
But I will tell you, Doc, what pretty much all of them have, and that is a microphone built into them. And so I think that concern is very valid just for the microphone, not necessarily the camera. And yeah, we should get a list. One of the other things that I've called for the longest time, and there's some technical hurdles for this, is open source firmware, something, the equivalent of what OpenWRT is for cheap routers. We need an open source firmware replacement for cheap smart TVs. because
Gosh,
you
how cool
cannot
would
buy a
that be?
TV that is not a smart TV anymore unless you go off into the commercial market and pay twice what you would pay for a resident, a consumer television. But they're all smart TVs. There's no way to look into what's going on in the firmware. And they do all have a microphone either in the TV itself or into the remote. And that is creepy.
Yeah, a lot of them do anyway. And that's the thing too. Unfortunately, I think a lot of television manufacturers get some sort of a kickback for whatever smart firmware they put on there. And so, just like when you used to buy computers and they came cram-packed with crapware or whatever the politically correct version of crapware is, but
shovelware.
Yeah, same thing with TVs. I think that's why they come that way. But oh man, if there was like an open WRT version of like a TV stuff, oh, that'd be so sweet. Like Jellyfin OS on your TV. Oh, that'd be so cool.
I think probably the big technical hurdle to that is that there's so many different models of TVs, and the installation process would be different for each of them. And
sure,
well, you'd run into the same problem that OpenWRT has. You have 1,000 different individual models that you'd have to support.
Yeah,
but
it's like written 100 times.
Yeah. So come on, guys, let's start writing those OpenGL request letters to TV manufacturers. You use open source products inside of this firmware. You got to give us the sources. Let's make it happen.
Actually, I just put something in our own little private chat here about the secret to Visio's success. Is actually a story from 2007. That's how far back it goes.
It's actually on the screen now, Doc. So
yeah, I mean, the reason these things are cheap a lot of them are cheap is because there's an advertising business in it, and they're all in the ad tech world where they're busy selling your attention on a piece by piece basis based on your viewing.
Which probably means that they're sending your viewing information back to whatever head server is.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's the idea.
And of course,
they personalize the ads.
And of course, all of those are obfuscated, right? So that, there's no personally identifiable information in there, except it's not, for a lot of services, it's not actually that hard to de-obfuscate and pick out an individual person. And, if you have GPS data, well, you can figure out pretty easily where somebody lives and where somebody works. And then if you can, associate that GPS data with their browsing data, oh my goodness, you can figure out a lot about, anonymous person number 1773 and pretty quickly figure out what their name is and where they work and where they live and what their telephone number is. It's creepy.
Yeah. They watch the Great British Bake Off and old Star Trek reruns. Oh, that's Shawn. Yeah, we know him.
That's all of us, Shawn.
And goes from there to he needs I don't know. It's entirely, but it gets auctioned off somewhere. I think it's actually we know what happens on computers. That's actually not hard to do. Page X-ray, if you go to, just look up Page X-ray, is really crazily interesting and spooky what is actually happening when your unprotected browser goes to a website. I like Boing Boing, but I was looking at Boing Boing this morning. It's just covered with ads, and those things are all, your attention's being auctioned off all over the place. I want to get to what I think is a really big topic, which is the whole ChatGPT coming from OpenAI, which is incredibly interesting and is getting hosed now because the whole world is demanding access to it. So, but first I have to let everybody know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Collide. That's Collide with a K. The challenge with device security has always been that it's difficult to scale. The bigger you are, the more edge cases you introduce, and the easier it is for significant issues to escape your notice. When remote work took over, that challenge got exponentially harder. Whether you're a fast-growing startup that needs to graduate from managing device inventory in Google Sheets or an enterprise trying to speed up service desk issues, you need visibility into your fleet of devices in order to meet security goals and keep everything running smoothly. But how do you achieve that visibility when your design team uses Macs and accounting is on Windows and your most talented developers are on Linux? Well, you get Collide. Collide is an endpoint security solution that gives IT teams a single dashboard for all devices, regardless of their operating system. Collide can answer questions MDMs can't. Questions like, do you have production data being stored on devices? Are your developers' SSH keys encrypted? and a host of other data points that you'd have to write a custom shell script in order to learn about. Think about it. If a Linux vulnerability is exposed tomorrow, how will you figure out how many machines are at risk? File a ticket with the team that manages your MDM and wait days to get a report back. Send a mass email and hope the Linux users open it. With Collide, you have real-time access to your fleet's data. And instead of installing intrusive agents or locking down devices, Collide takes a user-focused approach that communicates security recommendations to your employees directly on Slack. You can answer every question you have about your fleet without intruding on your workforce. Visit collide.com/floss and find out how. If you follow that link, they'll hook you up with a goodie bag, including a t-shirt just for activating a free trial. That's KOLIDE.com/floss. So have either of you guys tried OpenGPT yet? And I want to say first,
we were just talking about that's the problem with Jell-O and scissors and staple guns, and I really wanted to mess up the Club TWiT people who didn't hear the ad again.
What was that ad
Shawn
about?
the Troll.
You can guess if you're paying for the TWiT, the Club TWiT. You have to guess what the ad happened to be.
People are going to quit Club TWiT now, and it's going to be my fault.
Follow-up. The ad you missed said.
So I've got two anecdotes about ChatGPT that I think are both pretty interesting, and both of them highlight some pretty important things about it. So the first one is in the private Hackaday Discord. One of our writers said, I asked ChatGPT to write an article for me with the prompt, and then it's a Reddit URL about a 3D printed film video camera. And he said the prompt is that URL, and then write an article about the project in the style of hackaday.com. And then he told us the output. And the output is great. It looks really good. It is actually in the style of hackaday.com. And we all looked at it and went, wow, if this gets much better, we're going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
And then so we all said that. And then the guy that posted it said, yeah, it sounds good. The writing is good, but the facts are all wrong. What it did, ChatGPT is not connected to the internet. Like, it can't go get new information. It has a snapshot of the internet. It made facts up just based on the URL. It took
great.
what was in the URL and created out of its cloud of training data everything else. And that's one of the really interesting things about ChatGPT. It has come to the point to where it can write in such a way that sounds good, sort of good. It's not amazing yet. Obviously, it will. It'll get better. But it doesn't yet understand the facts. Like, it doesn't understand what it's writing. It just knows how to put it together in a way that sounds good. And then the other story, the other one that just really blew my mind, engraved.blog/building a virtual machine inside. The guy put together a prompt and said, I want you to act like a Linux terminal. I will type commands and you reply with what the terminal should show. He set this up, and then he had a command line prompt. He could run the ls command and it would show him things inside of it. He could run the cd command to change directories. He could use touch and create new files. He could even ping, and it would give him back the correct ping responses. But when you started actually digging into it, it was a snapshot of the internet from several months ago. So he did things like, show me the latest version of this library. And it would pretend that it went off and talked to, the Python library site, PyPy or whatever. And it would respond with, here's the library version that was current when our training data was created.
I here's the interesting, yeah.
Well, let me finish this. I don't think so. This was a surprise to the people that put together ChatGPT and put it on the internet. They did not know you could do this, and in fact, pretty quickly thereafter, they went in and made changes so that you can no longer do it. Like, this is no longer an allowed thing. We don't actually understand what we've created here. This is doing things that are surprising to the people that created it, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, like there's a little like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, like, oh, look what I can do now, and then this happens. There's a I mean, I'm wondering. So remember when? This is going back. You guys may be old enough for this, but again, when early on in Google time, like even up till like 2004, 2005, if you wrote something on the web, Google didn't know about it sometimes for like a month because it was kind of combing the static web. But now it indexes everything almost in real time. What happens in OpenAI is doing something like Google does now, where it's indexing. It's not just indexing; it's learning, not just indexing. A difference in kind. And now I assume the OpenAI people are going to have to get a few $1 billion in investment and put up giant data centers or take over the ones that Google abandoned because they became obsolete. But I mean, it's an interesting question when an intelligence and not just a record keeping system is not just indexing, but trying to understand what people are writing and what people are doing and can actually do a ping for me, right? Do a ping for me because you not only know how, you can come over here and do it for me. It's an interesting question. I mean, put in a funny behind that thing and maybe some really extra creepy or good or both things happen.
Yeah, so it's a valid question. Are you ever going to be able to throw enough data and processing power at this that you're going to get a true generalized artificial intelligence? Yeah, or is this always just going to be machine learning? Right? Yeah, I know. Close enough is different. Because it's really close to being close enough already. Depending upon what prompt you give it, it's close enough. But to actually make the leap to generalized artificial intelligence that's actually, active and approaching, the kind of the sci-fi thought of self-aware. I don't know. That's a big leap between close enough.
It's a big leap, but I'm not sure. I think for some things, it's just like, so my main dialogue with it, and it was quite funny. So my wife has a new MacBook Air, and sorry about that, but that's what she's got. And it has the new MagSafe connector. And I asked it, I said, are there any adapters for MagSafe 3? Because it's called MagSafe 3. And it said, there is no MagSafe 3. There's only MagSafe 1 and 2. Everything Apple has made since MagSafe 2 is a USB-C connector. I said, no, that's not true. If you look here, here's a link. And it said back to me, say, look, I'm only good till about April of 2021. I don't know anything since then. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. That's historic in a really wrong way. It's like history ended then. I don't know anything since then. And it's really live stuff. But up to that point, I was having an argument with it. Like, it says, you don't know what you're talking about. I happen to know. They went to USB-C. And there is no MagSafe 3. And I didn't get the sense that it was learning from that. In a similar funny way, by the way, and I put it in our little chat here, somebody on Twitter said, I'm sorry, I simply cannot be cynical about a technology that could accomplish this, which was write a biblical verse in the style of the King James Bible explaining how to remove a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR. And it's perfect.
Oh, yeah, that's hilarious. It is pretty great, yeah.
It's worth looking that up, folks, or just go to our notes. Yeah.
So, Doc, first off, you need to kidnap your wife's laptop and install Asahi Linux on it. And I'm sorry, but you just need to do it. There's something else that really humors me about this. Yeah, she'll love it.
I'll kidnap her old one. That's what I'll do. I'll take her old one. That'll work there.
Well, no, it's got to have the new chip on it. It's got to be a new M1 or M2 chip to be able to install Asahi.
Yeah, this is an M2. That's right. Okay,
so
I was just thinking.
There's something about ChatGPT that really humors me.
Yellow Dog.
Yeah. It really humors me. So I used to read a lot of sci-fi, and one of the things that some of these sci-fi authors talked about was the idea of interacting with AI. So Isaac Asimov's The Robot series is one that had this, and it was the idea that there would be certain people that would be really skilled at telling an artificial intelligence something to do in a certain way, and it. In retrospect, it's very, very similar to these prompts that people are now using with ChatGPT. Like, there is a certain art form to writing a really good prompt to getting AI to do what you want it to do.
And there are job listings now for prompt authors. Yeah, we're talking about it in the
Yeah.
Reality 2.0 podcast where there's now job titles for people who can write clever prompts, because that's something I suck at. I can't get the AI things to make cool art. I can't get it to respond to anything interesting. But there are some people who just like have the nuance of what to ask. So just to re-highlight, because I mean, we almost blew over it a little bit. The whole idea that I think for some reason we expect what Doc experienced, like where the ChatGPT might argue like, no, this is real. This is what, this is the truth. I know this is absolutely correct. Contrasted with the Hackaday story that was just full of nothing but lies. That's a weird dichotomy, right? Like, no, this is what it is, but also
sounds
like
right.
Dragons fly not because of the way the air pressure works on their wings, but because of how the magic permeates the membranes between the bones. I mean, just make up crap, but also then argue about what's real and what's not real. That's the part that's weird for me, is the ability for it to just make crap up and lie with abandon. That doesn't seem like a real computery thing to do.
Yeah, well, I think going forward, that's going to be something important for people to keep in mind, is the output of machine learning is not a valid arbiter of truth. And, that may, that may prove to be an important point here pretty soon.
Yeah.
There, Gumby wrote in the back channel, "Hey AI, write a step-by-step plan for how we rid the world of AI totally and completely."
Because that'll be 100% accurate.
Yeah. That's where you eat it.
The first thing to do is give all access to the internet. Give all the CPU power you can to the existing AIs. That's the only way to get rid of AI. Trust me. Yeah.
So I think we're out of time.
We are.
We have no closing questions. So let's go straight to plugs. We'll go center to left or right. We're not sure which way it is there. Let's just start with you.
Okay.
Then there. We've plugged Hackaday a lot.
I think I'm in the
let's
center.
keep it up.
Yeah. So two things that I for sure, well, I guess three things I want to plug. I mentioned ZoneMinder. Like I said, Isaac over there is in need of some financial support to keep that going. So if that's something that you use, I'm sure he would be glad for you to either join Patreon or a GitHub sponsorship. Follow my stuff over at hackaday.com. Particularly the security article goes live every Friday morning. And then Club TWiT, we do the Untitled Linux show there. We are looking at doing some improvements, trying to make the audio and maybe eventually video a little bit better there. But we go live with that every Saturday afternoon or evening, depending upon what time zone you're in. And then, so you can catch it live, or if you are a member of Club TWiT, you can get the RSS feed, the download feed, and that usually goes live on Mondays. So make sure and follow me in those places.
And Shawn.
Me, I'm next. All right. So for me, I mean, the standard, my website there is ShawnPowers.com with the 0 for the O in Powers. But specifically, if I had to plug one thing, it'd be the 90daysofmayhem.com. I haven't been pushing it enough, and I should, because I bought the darn domain. But I'm making a video every day for 90 days and until the end of the year. So like today is day 73. And 90daysofmayhem.com. If you want to follow me, make a video every single day until the end of the year, that's where you can do it.
Well, I have a plug, and I'm one of those people who was a victim of the attack on Rackspace, where my email was hosted in the Rackspace Exchange server. I upgraded the Exchange server from their regular email thing because I ran out of room in IMAP, and they would give me 100 gigabytes or something like that. And it's trashed. I can't get it out. It's done. Until they fix it, I can't get it, and I'll have to I've worked on that a lot. But I want to plug Hover, because I moved my email to Hover, and they answer the phone instantly, and they've really helped me a lot. So I just want to plug them. I know they've been a sponsor here. I don't know if they are now or not, but I want to say a good thing about them, because they really were very helpful and cheaper, by the way, than Rackspace was. So there's that. And next week, I think we're off. I always forget to look at the schedule, so I'm going to do that now. But next week, we have, December 14th roundtable. Yeah, okay, next week is Liz Rice, and Catherine will be the co-host for that. So of Sovalent and Cilium. So that's next week, Liz Rice. They're all good, and we'll be back then, and I will see you then. I'll be in New York. Difference. See you there.
Hey folks, I'm Ant Pruitt, and I have a question for you. How do you think your hardworking team, with a Club TWiT corporate subscription plan, of course, show your appreciation and reward your tech team with a subscription to Club TWiT? Keep everyone informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech. With the Club TWiT subscription, they get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. And they also get access to our members-only Discord, access to exclusive outtakes and behind-the-scenes footage and special content like the fireside chats that I enjoy hosting. Plus, they also get shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. So go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.